All right, welcome back to the channel. Welcome if you're new. I've got a very tiny adjustment to Zur and lots of games for you. The very small adjustment is that I took out Energy Field. Energy Field's a 2 casting cost artifact that prevents all damage to you from sources you do not control and goes to the graveyard if a card goes to your graveyard. It's a combo with Rest in Peace because cards don't go to the graveyard with Rip, and so you don't take damage from sources you don't control. Sources you do control, like Mana Crypt, would still, of course, damage you. But it was in here because it gave you the ability to easily attack with Zur. If you already had Rest in Peace, you could just get Energy Field, just prevent all damage to you, and force your opponent to have to deal with that while, of course, Zur is active. It was just a combo you could put together very easily with tutors and a defensive tool. But what I realized is that, generally speaking, the defensive tools in this deck are counter magic. You don't really need that because you can combo off so quickly with Zur on a regular basis, and your early game is the most important thing, that it was just a dead card in hand against combo decks a lot of the time. And so I don't think it's necessary for the deck. Now I still have Time Twister in the deck, a card that is a little bit, you could argue poor it either way, excuse me. But I'm actually pretty happy with Time Twister. It'll come up in a game, actually. The card that I replaced it with was Repeal. So I replaced it with Repeal here. It's just a clean solution to an early Mox Diamond or Chrome Mox, which does show up a decent bit. It can do things against like Lotus Petals and Jeweled Lotuses, possibly if you have, some of your fast mana. Typically, because you have to pay more than the cost of the spell, it's a little bit harder to do something like Bounce in Urza, right? That came out on turn 1. But that is the kind of weakness of the card. But it's a really powerful, cheap, flexible cantrip. And not a lot needs to be said about it. It does give you some interactions with Aura of Silence. You can like bounce a thing and then get the aura down and make it hard for them to replay it. It has a little bit of interaction with Time Twister. Of course, you can bounce a card and then Time Twister it into their library. It has a little bit of interaction with Mind Twist. It can produce mana with a Mana Crypt. You can spend 1 blue to bounce a Mana Crypt and get 2 colorless. You can convert a blue into colorless mana if you need to, which is all right. And it has a little bit of combo with Wishclaw Talisman. You can tutor for something. So like with a Wishclaw and a Repeal, you can actually Wishclaw into half of your combo, repeal the Wishclaw back to your hand, and then Wishclaw the second half of your combo, presumably winning the game on the spot. It would depend on how much mana you had and if you could sequence it correctly, but it gives you that ability as well. So it's got some flexibility. It's a counter to Thieving Skydiver and other steal effects. Just all around decent card. It also deals with Urza's Saga robots pretty decently, since you can repeal a robot for 1 blue and draw a card. Sometimes there's only time to get 1; they don't get 2 out of the Saga, and that can be pretty decent also. So lots of uses for the card as just a flexible, good early game card that helps you dig a little bit for mana. And I figured I'd just give it a shot in here. It just slots in real nicely to the deck. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and run through the games. And Zur has been doing extremely well. So I'm looking for all results. We're looking for the last 7 days. And we're looking for particularly from 9/11 and beyond. This is what I spent quite a bit of time doing here on the anniversary of 9/11. And as you can see, the only loss I had was to Ray Charles, and as you'll see, it's it was preventable, but it was kind of well, you'll see. Anyway, so we're going to start with the first game though against a tiny man cow. Also, the other thing that I'm working on is I'm working on trying to build up a tapped out deck list for Zur. But it's slow going. It's such a painful process. Hopefully we'll get there. But in the meantime, we'll run through these games here. And if you want the deck list For now, really the thing that you'll have to do is pause the video with the deck on the screen. Let's see if I can bring it back up one last time, give you another opportunity to do that now if you like. Of course, if it's on your phone, it can be a little hard to read. I can try to make it a smidge bigger without cutting off the cards, but it looks like we're going to cut off a few cards if I go any larger than that. So yeah, a few of the lands get cut off. So yeah, it's not really, it's hard to find the sweet spot for that sort of thing. But anyway, here's the deck list. I actually ended up making it smaller. I'll fix that later. And let's get started with the games. So Tiny Man Cow is playing Porphyros, God of the Forge, and chooses to go first. So I have a hand that has explosive potential. Doesn't have all the colors it needs for Zur exactly, but Saga can get Opal and Map can get another land, so it can kind of put them together. Plus Spellseeker can get Tithe. And Swords of Pleasure is a pretty good card against a deck like this, because if they do make Porphyros into a creature, you can plow it, or if there's just an early threat, well, look at this, Mana Vault turn 1, then we can deal with it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and run out the Saga into Map here. I want to get Saga ticking as soon as possible so I can go get Opal to make Zur easier to cast, because this looks like it might be a race. Take some damage from Porphyros into a Goblin Bushwhacker. Play a Grim Monolith on turn 2. I drew a Vampiric Tutor for my turn, not too shabby with that command tower in my hand. Take another 2 from Goblin King at plus an extra 1 since the Bushwhacker is bigger. So upkeep, I'm going to go ahead and tutor, and I tutor for a Gilded Lotus. Float a bunch of mana. Run out Lotus. Lotus into Spellseeker. Spellseeker into Mystical. Mystical Tutor for a Toxic Deluge, and I pass. And on my opponent's turn, he actually plays, I'm going to slow down, things are moving a little quick here. Raid Bombardment. So whenever a creature with power 2 or less attacks, it deals 1 damage to the player or planeswalker that creature is attacking. Raid Bombardment makes Porphyros a creature. And although I do have Toxic Deluge on top, I didn't want to take 6 from the opponent's commander here. I could have went ahead and maybe should have just chump blocked Porphyros here, taken 4 and then deluged it off the board and saved myself a card. But I decided to go ahead and just plow the Porphyros, chump block here, and I only take 2 damage. Basically, I was looking at, I anticipate winning as long as I can protect my life total, so that's kind of what I was setting up to do. And I go ahead and slam a Zur. My opponent's turn, when they untap Mana Vault, I know I'm in pretty good shape. And then they play extra planar lands on a mountain and pass for the turn. I've got Hall of the Bandit Lord off the top, doesn't do me any good. Attack with Zur here, and of course I go get Seal of Cleansing, so not Necro, just this turn, but that's because I have Map and Vindicate in my hand. So I seal away extra planar lands, which destroys essentially 4 mana, which seems pretty good. Then I map for strip mine a land, Vindicate a mountain, and pass for the turn. And now my opponent has no cards in hand other than like Flame Slash. What I did was, this way my opponent cannot like top deck Wheel of Fortune with a Mana Flare in play and just go ape. You know, the best top deck for them is probably Flame Slash or Red Elemental Blast, something like that, to temporarily kill Zur. But I have Hall of the Bandit Lord, so I can play the Hall, untap Grim. You know, I could play the Hall and recast Zur, or play the Hall, untap Grim, and then cast Zur with haste, and then go get the Necro from there. So feeling really solid here, and my opponent doesn't even bother drawing a card. They just scoop up on the spot. So we'll go back to gameplay. So that was against a Tiny Man Cow. So next game here is against Zula. And Zula is playing Codie Vociferous Codex. And a few days ago, I underestimated that card, and I got crushed by a combo. I just let my opponent have it, and then they activated it. I didn't really look closely enough at what it does, I guess. But anyway, they 5 mana and they get Cascade, 4 to 5 mana. So it was mana acceleration plus a Cascade effect. It's pretty gross, actually. In the right deck, it can be nuts. And my opponent just like activated it and comboed me out and killed me. So in this game, I'm going to be a little bit more careful with it, but what a start I've got. I am going Second, oh, excuse me, I'm going first. Against an opponent who mulliganed twice. So I lead off with first turn. How about turn 1 Dark Confidant? That seems pretty good. Turn 2, I've got Spell Pierce, feeling really good here. I got a Demonic Tutor, DT for a Crypt. That gives me enough mana to Thieving Skydiver Codie. And then when I see this Tangled Florahedron and Basic Forest, I think to myself, perhaps this opponent is not quite as hardcore as the last Codie deck that I faced. And now I'm thinking maybe I should have played this a little bit different. But you know, we played it. We did. This is the way it ran out. So being like overly cautious, I go get a mana drain here. Probably could have dropped a Crypt and fetched a mana drain and then tithed, but opponent just runs Codie directly into a mana drain, and I decided to let it go because I have the Skydiver. This is a little bit risky because if I take the Codie, I won't be able to play permanents. But I'm thinking that my opponent might not be able to win the game either. I actually clear my attack step and then steal it. I can get rid of it later also. And at this point, not only can I get rid of it, but I'm also in the very solid position of being able to use it. And since I have cards like Brainstorm and such, I can like I can activate it on my opponent's turn and Brainstorm and do things along those lines. Activate it and mana drain, you know. So there's plays that I can make that are pretty good, and I think that I would get enough advantage out of this that I wouldn't need to worry too much about the card, even though I couldn't cast permanent spells. And my opponent decides that they aren't going to win with given the board state, and they just concede. But I don't know. I actually don't know how that would have played out. I'm not sure that stealing it was correct, to be honest with you. But it did give me the win, so I'll take it. Burn the Obedient is next, and I have playing Jodah Archmage Eternal. And my opponent plays first turn Hallowed Fountain, Enlightened Tutor for Soul Ring, telegraphing a bit. And I have top deck Prismatic Ending, which is beautiful. So got a Force of Negation in my hand. I'm short on mana, but I can go get some real soon. So I let him have the Soul Ring here and just Enlightened Tutor instead, thanks to having drawn the Prismatic Ending. So I'll go ahead and get Crypt into Talisman of Dominance and Prismatic Ending. And with that, my opponent concedes. Little strange to me that they gave up right there, given I missed a land drop and everything, but I guess the Soul Ring must have been integral to their game plan. Not really sure. So anyway, I'll take concessions just as well as win. So Ray Charles 13 is next, and this is the game I lost. This is frustrating, to be honest. All right, so I'm playing against Yuriko. Yuriko is pretty good. I've got a really solid hand myself, so we're gonna go ahead and keep. Opponent does nothing on turn 1. Like, this shouldn't be a game that I lose, but yeah, you'll see. Turn 2 plays a Triton Shore Stalker. So I may have been a little aggressive with the Hall of the Bandit Lord there, because now I can't play Swords to Plowshares, but I will go get one. And opponent swings in. Of course, I can't block, so I'm going to get Ninjutsu. Ninjas into Evolving Wilds and just plays another unblockable creature. Okay, so I'm going to Brainstorm and get some mana down and basically just pass with the Plowshares ready to go. Opponent strip mines my Hall of the Bandit Lord, plays a Strionic Resonator and a Signal Pest. I'm going to go ahead and plow the Yuriko. So I play a land, play my commander. Seems like a normal game so far. And then, for no reason at all, I just lose the game. And it's because my opponent goes Thassa's Oracle, no tutoring, Demonic Consultation, and that's it. I'm dead. Lovely. Well played. You got me. Like, 100 card singleton and my opponent just naturals it. It's kind of brutal. It's so weird because it's like I'll do just gross, dumb. Well, you'll see. There's the game I'm going to finish on is just absurd, like the plays that I make. But no matter how bad they are, I don't know. I guess I just don't feel bad the way that I would if I were running Oracle and Consult, because uh, effects like this are just game ending versus like insanely good, but not necessarily game ending. I don't know. I guess that's where I draw the line, but I can understand why it's being played. I don't understand why it's legal. Given that this is the multiplayer list, I don't understand why people sit down to play a game of multiplayer and somebody just goes, "That's his Oracle Demonic Consultation," and kills everyone at the table on like everyone, you know, somebody goes turn two Manadork, turn two plays a Talisman, turn two doesn't have any significant play, whatever, plays their commander or something, and then you just like, "That's his Oracle Consult," kill the whole table. So what I'm thinking has happened is that uh, Sheldon and whoever their friends are that run the band list, they, you know, look angry at people. They tell them, "Hey, get out of here with that. We don't want to face that." And so people aren't doing that to them. So from their perspective, no problem. Format's fine. All right. Unfortunately, their blind spots become our pain for those of you who or into the channel because you like to see a game play out. But to be fair, Zur is the grossest deck I have built, probably. Um, and it does completely degenerate things. And so I'm not saying I'm any better. In fact, it's so good that I don't even think that, I'm not 100%, but I don't think that running the Thassa's Oracle combo in Zur actually would make the deck better. I actually don't think it needs it. I think it's that good. So um, the the thing that Thassa's Oracle feels like to me is it feels like back in the old days when somebody would draw Channel Fireball and you would go, well, okay, I mean, like that just happened. But um, back in those days, like you played 2 out of 3 with sideboards. And so, somebody might Channel Fireball you once, but you never. It happened once in a blue moon in a 60 card format with Demonic Tutor. It barely ever happened, and when it did happen, you you just eat it and then you beat them in the other 2 games. Versus the 100 card format, and of course once you had 4 Force of Wills in the format, it basically never happened. Versus now you've got what amounts to a Channel Fireball combo, which is strangely available in this format, but harder to stop in some ways, just because, of course, you don't have four Force of Wills. But like I said, I could have stopped at that game. I just tapped out thinking I was safe. Anyway, all right, so we've got El Giggler playing Sisay Weatherlight Captain. I've got another pretty gross hand. My opponent plays a what amounts to a triome. It's the old triomes that don't have a land type. And because it's 3 colors, I go ahead and just strip mine right away. I've got a little bit of a slow start here, but it should pick up with the Saga. And I'm going to go turn to Spellskite. So the reason I'm doing this, Saga can go get colored mana, so it's not as bad as it looks. Opponent just fetches some mana there, fixing their colors. And also I can make robots. I do have a hasted Spellskite, and what's funny is you can see the haste sticks. Opponent for their turn plays Nissen Wanderer, which will reward them for putting enchantments into play. On my turn, I just make a construct, and then I float some mana. At the end of my opponent's turn, I make a construct. Then on my turn, I float some mana, and having top decked Mind Twist, I'm gonna just dump truck my opponent's hand. Again, this is the difference for me. Like Mind Twist basically is Thassa's Oracle in 1 card. It basically wins the game, but basically isn't actually. So the opponent can actually get back into the game. So they can draw cards that reload their hand. For example, my opponent could just draw Sylvan Library here. Play Sylvan, next turn, pay life, draw 3, get back in the game. I mean, obviously I have Aura of Silence, but the point is there are things that can happen versus, when the game is actually over and there is nothing that can happen. Anyway, on my opponent's turn, they play an enchantment. Their guy triggers and they get to draw a card. They get an extra land. So they get a red, green, black land there. So good example of what I was talking about. They get to draw extra cards and stuff. But for my turn, I'm going to take a little more damage. I'm actually taking a ton of damage, all things considered, given this is a deck that likes to tutor out Necro, right? So I'm going to go ahead and put a hasted Zur out. and swing in. So this Sanctum is going to drain life me every turn for each shrine that my opponent controls. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it there, though, for now, and Necro a bit and sit. Oh, and I happen to find a Swords to Plowshare, so we'll sit pretty. The creature only triggers on things coming into play, not on cast, so I can actually respond by using a plow on it if my opponent had an enchantment. One of them instead plays their commander. I go ahead and Swords to Plowshares the other creature anyway, just because if I exile the commander with a Zur trigger, which is what I'm planning to do. So if I do it with the sphere, most people aren't going to put their commander into the sphere. They're going to put it in the exile zone. But if I plow the commander and exile the creature with the sphere, they'll put it under the sphere, and then they could potentially get it back. So it's better if you can to sphere away a commander. Incidentally, that is also, I didn't mention it, but that is also another combo with repeal. So if you detention sphere away something like a construct or a commander, something that doesn't actually go into the sphere, so it just basically exiles it, you could then repeal the detention sphere back to your hand, draw a card, and then kill another permanent, So anyway, for my turn, I attack. Mystic Sanctuary is going to put Swords to Plowshares on top because I'm figuring the best thing my opponent can do is get their commander down. And I also have Hardcast the Aura of Silence. I can take out the Sanctum, stop losing life. But because my opponent's clearly playing some kind of enchantment-based deck, they've got Verdurn Enchantress in the graveyard, I'm actually going to leave Aura of Silence in play, take a little more life loss here, and then go get Seal of Cleansing to deal with that card. So I was going to put the Swords to Plowshares, Necro for a few, and then just get rid of this thing. And the nice thing is I'm doing all this under the cover of a Spells Guide, so it's like even if my opponent had something to disenchant the Aura of Silence, I can redirect it to the Skite, or if they were trying to deal with Zur, pretty hard spot for my opponent to be in. And of course, I have counter magic as well. So we wrap that game up against E-Giggler and play against Wuzza Beva JJ. Wuzza Beva JJ. Or it could be Wasabi the JJ. It's probably what it is. Anyway, hopefully I don't get in trouble with YouTube for saying the JJ. I don't think I will. Anyway, AC Tyrant of Gyre Strait is being played by this opponent, and I have strangely enough, it's a keep. Greaves is great. Signet, I've got Fabricate. If I can just get a little bit of mana, I've got Force Will with Copy, or I can Force with a Fabricate and copy like a Soul Ring or something. So yeah, I can use my 2 lands to play Arcane, and then Arcane Fabricate into some mana. So this is okay. Unfortunately, I do have to lead off with the Wasteland. I lead off with Wasteland because Cavern of Souls might be more important in this match, given my opponent's playing blue. So you want to lead off with and my opponent says that he's first game. I assume that this opponent doesn't mean first game of Magic. They mean first game of Magic Online. So I offer a few tips throughout the course of the game as far as the interface goes. All right, so my turn. I'm gonna go ahead and Fabricate, and yeah, we're gonna get cooking now. Crypt, Grim into Talisman into Signet. And we're off to the races, and I have a Force of Will ready to go. I have enough mana that I can actually play Greaves, play my commander, and swing in with it. Opponent growth spirals into a Lotus Cobra, plays a land, puts a land into play rather. Probably drew the Cobra off the growth spiral. Well, with that Ponder draw, I actually have a better card to force with. But I haven't actually played a land drop this turn, so I'm actually going to swing in and go get Necro here. But I'm going to ponder in search of a land, and I do find one. So I'd like to hit a land drop, and since I can already force with Copy Artifact, and Necro of course will refill my hand, there's no point in holding the Ponder if I can use it to get mana. Alternately, I could have just Copy Artifact the Azorius Signet and then spun everything out in the exact same manner and held Ponder for Force of Will. But the same fine, because it actually gives me, by doing it this way, I actually have 1 extra mana untapped, and I could potentially play like a Vampiric Tutor or something along those lines. All right, so Necro down to 20 here. Feels pretty good. What is that? Yeah, a lot of cards. It's a lot of cards. All right, so I'm going to dump my hand. I actually end up deciding to dump the Vampiric Tutor, funny enough. But I do keep Mystical Tutor, and yeah. So what got exiled there was, to hand size, was Mystic Sanctuary, Prismatic Ending, Scrubland, Island, Mox Opal, Vampiric Tutor, Vedalken Shackles, Enlightened Tutor, Zoria's Signet, bunch more mana, bunch more lands. All right, so my opponent's turn, they play a land triggering their Cobra and run down some Scavenging Ooze action, and I'm of course not going to force that. I actually have lethal in my hand here, so I'm not even going to mystical at the end of their turn. Instead, I play Strip Mine, play Soul Ring, Mind Twist my opponent's hand to clear the way. And with the coast clear, I'm going to attack with Zur and fetch up Graveyard Removal, making their Scavenging Ooze weak, but of course that's not why we're getting it. I've got exactly 6 mana left, so we're going to go ahead and run down a Tezzeret into Helm of Obedience. Tezzeret will sacrifice his life in order to give me a Helm of Obedience. He'll obediently sacrifice his life. And with the last mana, I go ahead and exile my opponent's library. And they are playing, let's see. That's what I was facing. Looks like they had some artifact removal, but a absolute dearth of counter magic. Not enough counter magic whatsoever. Definitely need to. They probably don't realize that cards like Mana Drain and stuff are not, you know, $100 like they are in real life, or 100 plus, right? So anyway, yeah, exile, and that is the game against Wasabi. Forget it. You know the name. All right, so next game, Dragon 7K. This person jumps into 4 games with me, trying different decks, looking for a method to beat me, and then in the last game, does a little smack talking, but you know, I don't know, frustrated, I guess. Anyway, so in game 1, the opponent's playing Tergrid, God of Fright, and they Inquisition me, taking a Mox Diamond, leaving with Mana Drain. So it makes sense considering my commander, but it also doesn't make sense. Anyway, on turn 2, my opponent duresses me and takes the top decked Mana Crypt, leaving me with Mana Drain. So if the first play made sense, then the second turn did not make sense. That was the point where you really needed it. Because now on turn 3, my opponent cannot cast a spell because they know I have Mana Drain. And as long as I'm not, you know, foolish, then they're just not going to be able to do anything, right? Like, what are they going to do? Feed me mana? So at the end of my opponent's turn is the only time I might sack a fetch land. And with my opponent not playing any spells, I'm keenly aware of opposition agent. So I'm going to be very cautious about how I do this. All right, so I go ahead and get an Underground Sea there because I'm already holding Grave. This turn I'll go ahead and play Grave and Soul Ring, but now I've got a blue fetch land up, and I've got 3 islands in play, which means I can recur this Mana Drain. Opponent gets a Cabal Stronghold, plays Liliana the Last Hope, and pluses it up and passes for the turn. All right, so for my turn, I go ahead and play Cavern of Souls with that Cabal Stronghold. I'm even happier that I didn't play. Whenever you play against Mono Black, Urborg should be one of the last lands out of your hands, and in this case, it was, and I was quite happy for that. On my turn, I go ahead and play a Cavern of Souls, Trinket Mage, Expedition Map pass turn. Opponent goes for Tergrid, and I Mana Drain that. Shrinks my Trinket Mage here, and I'm going to go ahead and Vampiric Tutor. But now the coast is clear for me to use fetch effects. So I screw up here. I'm not sure what I was thinking. I know what I was thinking, but I didn't. I Vampiric Tutored. So what I was supposed to do was fetch Mystic Sanctuary, targeting the Mana Drain, and then sack the map in response, which is exactly what I planned to do. And then for some reason, my brain was like, oh, you need to Vampiric in response. So the card that I Vampiric for is, so I draw a Mana Drain for the turn, but the card I Vampiric for is underneath the Mana Drain. So it's the next card. Of course, I'm going to pump the mana into Zur, And after thinking about it, I realized, man, that was stupid. So I go ahead and fetch my Wasteland and get rid of their Cabal Stronghold. It represents way too much mana for them. And I just have the mana drain. I lost my Vampiric Tutor target. I threw it away for nothing, just because I sequenced that so poorly. Fortunately, on my opponent's turn, the Ambitions cost to draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. I mana drain it, of course. Not sure what. I don't know. Anyway, and the opponent concedes, and then on my turn, had they not conceded, I would have tried to spend the mana. I have nothing to spend it on. And even if I didn't draw anything, of course, Zurich goes and gets Necro, and then you know how that game ends. So Dragon 7K scoops it up and then jumps right back into another one. Maybe thinking, okay, realizing that leaving mana drain in my hand was a mistake. So he's not going to do that again, right? So he jumps in with another Tergrid. This time I get to go first. So I'd pitch a Wasteland, play a Soul Ring, play a Mana Confluence, play a Wishclaw Talisman, and pass. Now look at, if this is the energy field, imagine if energy field was repeal here, I could have Wishclawed and then repealed it right back to my hand. Instead, my opponent Inquisitions the energy field out of my hand. It's the only target in my hand. I draw a Mox Opal, so yeah, I think about it, and I decide I'm going to Wishclaw into Time Twister. Isn't that beautiful? So I Wishclaw, I have no cards in hand, I Wishclaw into Time Twister. My opponent's got 2 islands, two swamps, 7 cards in hand, and a Wishclaw with 2 charges on it. He's going to have to get back to me if he uses. As for me, I've got 3, 4, 6 mana in play and 7 cards in hand. Time Twister just totally nuts there. Both Wishclaw and Time Twister like doing some work in this game. Opponent plays Distress, I Spell Pierce it, and they concede. I mean, it's clearly over, right? So anyway. All right, so Dragon 7K loses the second game to just a pretty gross and powerful hand. Basically, that's kind of one of the reasons Time Twister's in here. Time Twister is just one of those cards that it rewards you for dumping your hand, right? So it's a power card when you have a power start. And the rest of the time, not so much. But it also give me a way to recover from like a Mind Twist or whatever I was talking about. Mind Twist doesn't necessarily end the game, you know. That's the kind of card that can fix the Mind Twist problem should you be affected by it. And I like having outs. All right. So we're gonna start again. Dragon 7K has got their Tergrid and is going to go first, and I've got a really good hand, so we'll keep. Vedalken Shackles doesn't look like it'll be too useful against this opponent, but the rest of it's looking pretty good. I decide to Verdant into Imperial Seal rather than playing Saga on turn 1 because this gives me a potential for a turn 2 Jace, and when my opponent doesn't duress me, yay. That's exactly what I do. So I duress, all right, I Jace and then hide a Mind Twist on top of my deck. My opponent's turn, he gets a Phyrexian Arena. Of course, I'm going to draw the Jace and use the Jace, or I'm going to draw the Mind Twist and use the Jace. Shuffle away what I don't want. Play a Talisman of Dominance and vindicate my opponent's Phyrexian Arena and pass. Opponent has a Ruinous Path for Jace, so Jace is dead, but I've already gotten so much value out of it. We'll go ahead and play Saga here, and with leaving Mana Leak up, Mind Twist my opponent for 4. My discard better than his discard. And I've got, my opponent's now got 5 lands and a commander. I've got, a Mana Leak ready to go, and he has no cards in hand. And with the Mana Leak and no cards in hand, my opponent scoops. Of course, Saga's going to tick up there. I can make a robot and cast my commander. It's just pretty gross. Or I can impulse if I wanted to. I'd probably go with the robot. It's pretty safe. Anyway. But, you know, I could wait and see what my opponent does and then impulse at the end of their turn, something like that, if I need to, in response to a spell or something. Anyway, Dragon 7K jumps in for the 4th and final game in this series. Once again, playing Tergrid, and I have to take a mulligan. I'm going first, or rather second, and I keep a Chrome Mox in a mulligan hand. And I've got unfortunately, I've got a Force of Will, but no blue cards, so I imprint a Swords of Plowshares and play a turn 1 Arcane Signet. Opponent's actually got a creature, a Leaden Mirror there, so I'm going to go ahead and play Zur, and I top deck the Detention Sphere, which means I have Force of Will ready to go. Opponent plays Distress. I no longer have Force ready to go. Leaves me with the Force of Will and takes the Detention Sphere. A very strange choice given, I don't know, most people take Force of Will, but hey, I'm going to attack, and go get a Necro and a Necro for quite a few cards. And my opponent says, your money deck is pretty bad. I say, you're free to post your impressions on my YouTube channel in the comments and engage in a discussion with the other viewers. And with that, I believe my opponent logs off. So I do understand the frustration. Opponent's playing like a bunch of discard, and you would think, hey, that's the way I stop blue decks. But actually, it doesn't work that well, as you can see. Especially not a blue deck that can just tap to put Necro into play. All right, J Mill is my next opponent here. And I was getting some pretty good draws, right? Although this deck is surprisingly consistent at getting pretty good draws. And I've got a great hand. I'm so excited to play it. Ancient Tomb into Arcane Signet. I've got Greaves coming with a Ponder. And unfortunately, J Mill sees my commander and concedes. So we move on to Road Rash 3DO. A three-dimensional Road Rash does not sound pleasant whatsoever. So we'll see how it is as an opponent. All right, so my opponent's playing Muzio, Visionary Architect. This is the one that for 4 mana looks at top X. X is the highest mana value among artifacts. Finds a card and sneaks it directly into play. So it's a Jamday Tome that casts the spell. It can't be countered as long as it hits, which is pretty darn good, actually. I think that's a really cool commander and certainly fair. But nowhere near the power level of Zur, obviously. And I've got a Force of Negation with a Mystical Tutor, an extra blue card. I've got Hull of the Bandit Lord and Toxic Deluge for the commanders. So this is a good, solid start. However, my mana situation is a little clunky. I'm missing some colors here, but it'll be okay. It should be okay. So I get a Watery Grave down. I can now Mystical Tutor for like Demonic if I need to. For my opponent's turn, they play Guildless Commons. It is a Karoo that gives colorless. And with that, I have the door open to Mystical Tutor, so I'm going to Mystical. And it's going to be a painful turn here. I'm going to Mystical for Demonic. Demonic off Hall of the Bandit Lord. My Demonic Tutor gets haste. Haha. And I'm going to go ahead and fetch Cavern of Souls and then strip mine, rather Wasteland, my opponent's Guildless Commons. And I did it that way to make it look like I was tutoring for the Wasteland so that my opponent wouldn't anticipate. They would expect that that's what happened there, and they might not realize that my mana situation is a little sketch. But rather than playing it out, my opponent just concedes, and I'm okay with that. It was a big tempo swing, the risk of Karoos. So Dragon 7K signs back in. I don't know if maybe he didn't log out. Maybe he just popped smoke for a little bit. But anyway, signs back in or shows back up to play me again. This time they've had time to go and work on their deck, so now they can come and crush me with their Azuri Renegade leader deck. And I've got a very solid hand, very capable hand. But also I've got Swords of Plowshares, which is really nice to see against green. And my opponent does have to mulligan. But they lead off with Forest and nothing. And I have to play Mystic Sanctuary tapped. I could have played the Verdant and gone for maybe Scrubland into Enlightened Tutor, but I'm hoping to not have to tutor for Scrubland. I was hoping to avoid it. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. My opponent's turn 2, they play Elvish Visionary, and then turn 3, they play a Wood Elf. In response to the Wood Elf, I go ahead and just plow the Elvish Visionary before it grows out of control. They're going to Wood Elf for a Forest. Pass for the turn. My turn, I'm just going to go ahead and cast a Trinket Mage. And Trinket's going to go get a Crypt, and Crypt gets a Monolith, and my mana situation's looking real good now. Opponent's got a Ghost Quarter that they haven't used yet, which is interesting. So I'm an Enlightened Tutor. Now, if my opponent's really clever here, and based on what I've seen with the comments and stuff, I chalked my opponent up to not being clever enough to catch the play, which is that I Enlightened Tutor for Gilded Lotus. My opponent should then Ghost Quarter one of my lands, and I either go and get an island which turns off the Enlightened Tutor essentially, or I don't, in which case the Ghost Quarter is a strip mine, and then from there they get to they basically have used the Ghost Quarter to its maximum potential. But my opponent doesn't do that, so I just get to draw my Lotus unmolested, and we'll go ahead and Lotus out into a Teferi, and I'm going to use Teferi to bounce my Grim Monolith here with 1 mana floating. So I'll draw a card, and then tap the Wasteland, play the Grim Monolith, sit on Trinket Mage to block, and pass for the turn. That was the plan, but my opponent just concedes on the spot, and we move on to Kaizen Ulra. This time, Dragon 7K did not make any comments, which is appreciated. Maybe he realized it was a little bit out of line. Hopefully, I'll give the person credit and for not continuing in that vein, which I appreciate. All right, so Kaizen Ulra is playing. Maybe this person's a Marine, playing Derevi, Imperial Tactician, and I've got a Soul Ring hand. I want to keep it. I've got Shackles, which is really good against Derevi, and Narset, which should be good. In fact, everything in my hand is really potentially good if I could just cast it. But I am going second. My opponent took a mulligan, so I decided to risk it and actually keep this hand. And I draw a Mystic Sanctuary, which is really nice. Excuse me, I draw a Dimer Signet, play my Mystic Sanctuary. The Dimer Signet's really nice because I need mana. And then my opponent's turn 2 is a Hushbringer. Creatures entering the battlefield or dying don't cause abilities to trigger. Now, I have no idea. I don't believe that card has much business being in Derevi, given that it just turned his commander off, but it is in this Derevi deck. And then plays a land and plays Thalia Heretic Cathar. Now, that card's going to be a little more frustrating. I drew Lightning Greaves for the turn, but creatures and non-basic lands I control coming into play tap means that it's not going to have the same impact that you want it to have in this deck. In the meantime, though, I Mind Twist my opponent. I get a Lavinia, a Temple Garden, and a Swords to Plowshare. I was really glad that that those cards were gone now. They play their 4th land, and with no cards in their hand, I'm just going to go ahead and cast Zur unprotected. And my opponent's turn, they play Derevi. Of course, it doesn't trigger, but it will trigger when the creatures deal damage to me. So opponent can tap or untap 2 permanents here. They decide to untap their creatures, not their mana, which is a little strange. Anyway, for my turn, I draw Tithe, and I attack with Zur. And with Zur, I fetch Detention Sphere, and I get rid of Thalia, because my hand is stacked. And I don't really need Necro just at this exact moment. I'll be fine, but Thalia is a huge annoyance. With that out of the way, I've got, I can develop, sit on counter magic. I've got Shackles that I can use to threaten Derevi. Like, I'm in great shape here. Opponent drops with their, eventually figures out the block with their Flying Lifelink, which is correct. And I go ahead and just tutor up a couple of islands to go with these Shackles in my hand. After combat, I play Shackles and pass for the turn. 3 mana up. I've got Narset Counterspell and Shackles ready to go. At the end of my opponent's turn, I go ahead and just take Derevi. Or, no, sorry. In the beginning of my opponent's combat step, I take Derevi. If I don't do that and they attack, they can actually put Derevi triggers on the stack and untap my Shackles if I tried to take it and like during combat. Or they could tap down my mana. And it's just a pain and irritating to have to worry about that. So I take it now. It does open up the door that, you know, they've got 2 mana there. They might have like removal for the Shackles and then be kind of a disappointment there, but nothing that would be a severe problem. Of course, I did Detention Sphere with Thalia, so they could like bounce Thalia and get it back, you know, kill the Detention Sphere. Like, there's plays they could make here, but outside of maybe stealing Zur, there really isn't anything too crazy. And if they do steal Zur and they don't have a way to disenchant Shackles, then in that case I would just untap the Shackles, give them their Derevi back, and take my Zur back since it's the better commander. And I would give it haste and attack, and then after that I don't have to worry about it being stolen anymore. So all around, not a big deal. But instead of all, but it was a concern, something you should be thinking about, right? Fortunately, opponent had nothing and they scooped. So Zen is next. Maybe the best play might have been Jace. I'm not really sure what their best play could have been, but all right, with just 2 cards in hand and 4 mana in those colors. All right, so Obzen here says, I believe it said something about, I think this person had said they were a fan of the channel. I'm not sure, but they do look like somebody who is familiar with Brian's in the Paint Artist deck, which means that they're probably a fan of Brian's at a minimum. which is super cool. So anyway, I've got a hand that I can play draw go against Nin. I can stop early fast mana, and I can get a little bit of fast mana myself with some card selection. So this is a perfectly keepable hand. Opponent has first turn Mox Diamond into Ponder. So happy to see that Ponder there, because that means that the prismatic ending is almost certainly going to resolve, and we're going to just go straight for it. Boom. Goodbye, Mox. 2-for-1, and slowing my opponent down. Really, really nice there. Drew a Swords of Plowshares for the turn. My opponent plays a Mystic Sanctuary. So this is great. Then I draw a Demonic Tutor, which means I get to Demonic Tutor into a Crypt, into Arcane Signet, into Ponder, or Swords to Plowshares. Of course, I'm going to Ponder here. I'm not going to leave up Plowshares. I end up stacking my deck so there's a Saga with a portable hole underneath. And then so that basically if my opponent tries to get some mana to catch up, I can exile it. And if they play their commander, I still have the Plowshares. Opponent plays a Spellseeker for Flame Slash to try to stop Zur, which makes a ton of sense. I'm going to go ahead and do exactly what I said. I'm going to go ahead and, excuse me, Portable Hole away the, I'm going to pause. Sorry about that. So I'm going to Portable Hole away the Mana Crypt. And although I know that my opponent has fetched up a Flame Slash, which deals 4 damage to Zur, I've got so much mana, and my opponent's so tight on mana, that it makes sense to me to go ahead and just play the Zur here. Let them go ahead and like mess around with top, and then Flame Slash this thing, hit me for 1. And I'll just replay it. And of course I've got Saga coming as well. So that's totally fine. And I drew Spell Pierce, which is just brutal, like an amazing top deck right here. So play the Saga, play the Zur. Opponent runs out top, activates their top rather. I'm not sure what they were hoping to hit, but whatever it is, maybe they hit it. We'll see. But now I'm sitting on Spell Pierce and a Source of Plowshares. They can't even really swing in with the Spell Seeker here. I guess they could have, because I wouldn't have blocked. Anyway, on my turn, my opponent tries to Ice Zur, and I've got Spell Pierce, and that's it. So I'm assuming this opponent knows what's up. I mean, all these cards so good. Opponent plays exactly the way I would have played if Zur doesn't get dealt with immediately. They scoop, but so nice to be able to just. It's so nice that like the removal has been printed to deal with Sol Ring and Friends, for colors that aren't just red. Like besides like red and green, like white actually has removal finally for early Sol Rings and stuff, because it's been kind of a tradition in Magic that white was the artifact removal and enchantment removal colors, and then the fact that green and red were better at it than white for a very long time in Commander was very disappointing, quite honestly, because white is just so weak as a color in Commander in general. And the cards that have really helped tremendously have been Prismatic Ending and Portable Hole. Just two outstanding cards. When Prismatic Ending was suggested to me, I thought, that doesn't seem good at all. But I didn't understand that for 1 mana you can kill a Sol Ring. Once I realized that, I was completely on board, and I've loved the card. So hopefully they continue to do more stuff like that. What I'd really like to see, is they still haven't printed it, is Swords to Plowshares for non-creatures, non-lands. That gives the controller life equal to the converted mana cost. That's what I want to see. Just print instant speed, Swords to Plowshares for non-creatures. It would just be, that's the card that needs to be made. But anyway, in the meantime, we have cards that are pretty close to that with Prismatic Ending and Portable Hole. So Shrek is my next opponent. And Shrek is playing Urza, High Lord Artificer, and I've got a Mox Diamond into Lightning Greaves start with Force of Negation and Detention Sphere backing me up. So go ahead and run out Greaves and pass. And my opponent runs out Island. I'm going to pause. Jeweled Lotus, which that should be my Force of Will target. But I think about it and I'm like, honestly, like the Lotus, they're going to play Urza, and then they've got 1 blue at that point. But if they don't do anything particularly significant, I could just play a land and Detention Sphere the Urza and kill it without Force of Negating, and then that'll allow me to hold the Force for later. So I decided to actually let it go, even though it does give them a construct if the line plays out, and they do use the construct to play a top here. But I mean, assuming that I get the Urza here, and this is a little risky because they can now Force a Negation or the other free counter, like they can prevent this play from happening. And if they do, I'm toast. But if I exile Urza here, I get to keep the Force of Negation, and I drew a blue card. So, I figured this is a little risky, but it actually makes a lot more sense. So go ahead and play the Sphere, and luckily it does stick. My opponent taps correctly, taps the top for mana, and then uses it to top, looking for a Force of Will effect, doesn't find one, and back to my opponent's turn. So they, fortunately, Lotus dealt with, but my opponent does have even more fast mana. Chrome Mox, imprinting a Tezzeret, and Rhystic Study. What a annoying card, but not annoying enough to force a negation. I draw for the turn and pass. Opponent tops. Luckily, I drew an impulse there, so I can actually force and pay the mana with the impulse and cast a mana drain if I need to. So as soon as my opponent makes a play on their turn, I mana drain that, pay for the mana drain cost. And that 2 mana from the Sapphire Medallion will set me up real nicely to play my commander and pay the tax. Even better, I draw a land, so that means that I can force a negation and pay for the tax on the next turn. So I go ahead and pay the Rhystic Study tax here using the mana from Mana Drain. Slam some boots on Zur, and we got a boot, scoot, and boogie into the red zone there. I'm going to go ahead and grab Aura of Silence. So my opponent's playing a ton of artifacts and enchantments. Aura of Silence, we know that there's a Sensei's Divining Top, so now it's a 3 mana Sensei's Divining Top. And if they don't do anything particularly crazy here, I've got the Greaves on Zur plus the Force of Negation that I can pay. It's really hard for my opponent to do much here. And I've got Aura of Silence to get rid of Rhystic Study also, because the card's a pain in the butt. I really want to get Necro, of course, but I feel I can wait a turn and the Aura is going to disrupt them pretty hard. It does. They have to tap 3 mana for a top. And of course, now they can't do anything like slamming. They can't play like Crypt here or any of that good stuff. Instead, they just use the top to get a Misty Rainforest. I draw for the turn, and at this point, I'm ready to go get Necro. I want to go ahead and conclude this game. My opponent's tapped out thanks to the Aura of Silence fetch, so I'm going to get rid of their Rhystic Study, play an Arcane Signet, Necro for more than I should be allowed to. And at the end of it all, I'm still at 20, right? All right, so we're gonna end with a boatload of cards making their way into my hand, and we're gonna discard down to setting up the combo kill with lots and lots of defense. So the cards I discarded were a bunch of lands: Preordain, Jace the Mind Sculptor, Vampiric Tutor, Prismatic Ending, and more mana. And what I kept was a hand that's very, very blue, a Tithe so I can hit my next couple of land drops, assuming there's more than one turn coming, and a Teferi, which is, I've heard is pretty good against blue, mono blue. Anyway, opponent does get to play a Sensei's Divining Top that doesn't cost them 3 mana to get it into play. Hits me with Construct for 3. That's fine. Uses their top, fetches, and responds to the whole thing with, I can't remember the heck my opponent's doing here. A Dig Through Time. Dig Through Time is a card that I'm perfectly willing to miscalculate. I miscalculate, and my opponent negates, Pact of Negations, the miscalculate, targeting their Dig Through Time with one of the last cards in their hand. I allow the Pact of Negation to resolve, so my miscalculate fails. Then I Force of Negation the Dig Through Time using Impulse. So what's happened is that my opponent's Pact of Negation has resolved on my counterspell, but Force of Negation has exiled the spell that they wanted to resolve anyway, but now they've got a problem because they have an upkeep cost. Opponent then finishes resolving Misty, gets an untapped land, and that gives me a chance to tithe up a couple of mana sources. Lovely. Lovely stuff. I'm going to go ahead and play a land, and for my turn, cast Teferi, bounce their Mox, swing in, grab myself I could have, attacked. And so here's the thing. My opponent was dead on board because all I had to do is attack with Zur and get Seal of Cleansing and kill their Mox, right? And then they've got an upkeep to pay. But instead, I get a copy artifact for Construct to protect Teferi, just because I can, and I Necro. I'm still going to sit on like my counter magic. I'll get Teferi down. There's literally nothing my opponent can do. But yeah, they were I think I understand the risk that they took, even though I had an active Zur, because I'd already fetched a Detention Sphere and an Aura of Silence, and if I didn't have another Disenchant, a Seal of Cleansing, or something along those lines, then the Mox would have stayed in play, potentially from my opponent's point of view, and they weren't dead on board. But of course, as you know, there is a Seal of Cleansing in the deck, so they were 100% dead no matter what, because they were not going to be able to play the Pact cost, unless they had Stifle. So if they have Stifle, they can actually stifle the Pact's triggered ability, which is the whole purpose to getting the Teferi into play. Now, getting the copy artifact on the construct after Teferi resolves is just, luxury. What I should have done, to be quite honest, is attacked, copy artifact the Arcane Signet, so I had enough mana to play both counter spells, then played the Teferi. Then I could counter, they have 2 cards in their hand. I can't imagine what counter spells they could have, but if they did, I could stop them and then bounce their Mox and win. But either way, we're there. The game is over, and opponent does the Pact of Negation. All right, so Shrek was totally swamped by card advantage there, and somehow I've lost my game. Okay, here we are. So after Shrek is Obzen once again. And Obzen is, in this game, in the Pain Artist. Opponent keeps. I am going first. So my opponent keeps a hand of 7, doesn't mulligan. So with a hand of 7 on a perfect keep, even though I do have a hand that looks like it can cast Necro, I can actually get Necro pretty easily with Zur. So I actually decide that because I drew Time Twister and I'm going first, and because my opponent kept, they have a hand of 7 that they want. So let's give them a hand of 7 they might not want. So I'm just going to go ahead and use Time Twister as a draw 2 and potential hose their draws phase, plus shuffle Necro back into my deck where it belongs for now. And I draw this lovely hand. Opponent goes Scalding Tarn. I should have played a different land though, by the way, not basic land. I should have played my best land, not my basic land. But either way, I'm going to go ahead and get the Arcane Signet down. And against Nin, I have a play that should be pretty backbreaking here. If the game wasn't already bad enough, I get Aura of Silence down. And against Nin, that is just super brutal, right? Because now my opponent can't really develop fast mana whatsoever. It all costs 2 extra mana. They can even play Soul Ring here. And then if they do, they've got to tap out, right? So I'm just going to push my luck here and Fabricate into a potential mana drain. And Fabricate works, so I go ahead and get a Expedition map with the Fabricate, and I just play a land, play the map, pass for the turn. Because again, I don't know what my opponent's hand is, but I do know that it might not be what they want it to be. I'm going to go ahead and Mana Crypt, use Mana Crypt to activate the map and go get Cavern of Souls. And with that, I can cast Zur here. And unless Zur gets stolen, and that's hard to do with an Aura of Silence in play, opponent impulses into my turn, I'm in pretty good shape. Gilded Drake's about the only card that I fear at this point. Opponent plays an Ancient Tomb and passes. I mean, you can't play Treachery, can't really play Shackles and use it. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get a land into play. I'm going to test the waters with a Tezzeret, I believe. Or no, I'm going to just go get a Necro. So I could have with the Tezzeret, I could have played Tezzeret here. And if my opponent counters it, then I get Necro, and so what? But if they don't, then I go get, I just use Tezzeret to get Helm, and I go get Rip, rest in peace. But honestly, that's just so aggressive. Like I pushed hard enough. With Zur here, you go get Necro, you Necro for a bunch. Make sure that the hand is full of counters. I've got tons of mana. And then from there, I don't have to play a risky game. I can just force my will, essentially, on the opponent. Opponent says the Aura put in an S-low to work this game. I say, yeah, at one time this was the only card that back in the day, I made a deck that was exactly 1 land. 1 land? 2 lands. 58 cards, 2 lands. It was a Type 1 deck a long time ago before the ban list. It actually, I don't know if it was the cause of the ban list getting adjusted or what, but it was pretty gross. I fell asleep one day, had a dream about this deck, woke up and built it, and it was a 2-land deck with crop rotation in it, with crop rotation, no, sorry, with fast bond in it, and that was because you intended to kill your opponent on the first turn, and you wanted both lands potentially. The 2 lands were Strip Mine and Tolarian Academy. And the reason you wanted Strip Mine was because back in those days, if your opponent went first turn Tolarian Academy, you weren't allowed to play your Tolarian Academy. You couldn't have 2 legends in play with the same name. It wasn't like you could have an Academy, I can have Academy, and you just can't have a second one. Not like today. And back then, first legend won. So you had to have fast spawn so that you could fast spawn, Strip Mine away their Academy, and then play yours and go off. Not that you had to have Academy to win, but it was so powerful that it was worth running 2 horrible cards in a 58 card deck with only 2 lands, specifically just for that interaction, just because it was such a consistent turn 1 kill deck, and it was so much easier to win with Academy. And the deck was running Candelabra of Tawnos, so part of the reason that Academy was so degenerate in that deck was that you ended up getting multiple Academies with just a 1. So pretty cool stuff. Anyway, so I was mentioning to Obzin that there was a time in Type 1 when Aura of Silence was one of the only ways to not lose on turn 1. And it was actually, the deck was so ridiculously degenerate that if you were playing the mirror match after game 1, you would sideboard in Aura of Silence ×4 and mulligan. You would either keep hands that had like Force of Will go off type potential, or mulligan into Lotus Aura of Silence. And if you could go first turn Aura of Silence, then you would literally win the game on the spot, because the deck, there was nothing that it could do whatsoever about that play other than Force of Will to try to stop it. But yeah, pretty weird. It was a weird time. But it was a time when Mana Crypt and Mana Vault and Lotus Petal, none of those cards were restricted. So you can imagine. Anyway, Jubilium 357 here is the next opponent. And then we've got another one against Obzin, I believe, unless I've already played the third one. We'll find out in just a sec. Yeah, okay. Jubilium 357 scoops to the fact that I'm playing Zur. But had they not, pretty good hand. It's a little risky. I've got Rest in Peace here, but thankfully I do run Time Twister. So if my opponent arrested out of my hand, that would be okay. Because, my play would be first turn ET for, Crypt. Turn 2, play a land, play Crypt, play Arcane Signet, play Seal of Cleansing, and then like Mystical Tutor at the end of their turn for whatever. Something along those lines, most likely. Alternately, I could have like tutored for Lotus and then just gone for a turn 2 Zur potentially as well. But we'll never know, because Jubilium scoops it up to Zur existing, and I get another game against Obzin, which is cool. This opponent seems pretty decent. And I'll pause, and this time, once again, Nin the Pain Artist facing off against Zur, so a pretty awesome match. And I have a very clunky hand, but it's not really. It's got Teferi, which is extremely good against Zur. It's got potentially really good mana, early ways to look for it, and I'm going second. So I think this is actually a keep, funny enough. So I decided to do exactly that. I mean, if I can get a land and get a turn 2 Talisman into Preordain, my opponent has turn 1 Crypt. Also, and uses to play Solve the Equation for Force of Will. So first turn tutors up a Force of Will. Also, I had the Prismatic Ending, and if I top deck the Plains here, because I was thinking about the fact that they could have Crypt early or Soul Ring, right? And this is a solution to that, so it was worth keeping for that reason as well. So my opponent's got a Force of Will in hand, 5 cards in hand, had to mulligan, but does not find anything. On my turn, I go ahead and ponder. And so I drew a Godless Shrine, and then I ponder into a Jeweled Lotus and Urza's Saga's on top of the deck. And I play the Jeweled Lotus hoping that I can get that Force of Will out of their hand. But they don't take the bait, so I go for Godless Shrine untapped into Prismatic Ending, targeting the Crypt. And that one does get forced. So good, Force of Will's gone. They use a Snapcaster Mage to do it. That's fine. Now I've got a Lotus with the potential Zur coming, and my opponent, for their turn, thieving Skydivers. And I had almost F6'd, and thank goodness I didn't. Like, I'd right-click yield, and I had to right-click and unyield as fast as possible when I saw the Skydiver. I was completely like not thinking of what my opponent could have. So thankfully, they don't get to steal my Lotus. And so I sacked the Lotus, and he comments that it looks like they fixed the Jeweled Lotus bug where commander mana would continue to float in your mana pool even if it wasn't spent. And it does appear that they have fixed that, thankfully. So Skydiver disenchants my Lotus, but does not steal it, which is a pretty big deal. So on my turn, I drew Enlightened Tutor. Sorry, did I say Urza Saga was on top? I guess it was Enlightened Tutor that was on top. And I preordain. I tutored for a mana Crypt. I go top with both cards. It's a Windswept Heath and a Crypt, I believe. And we just have a little chat about the card getting fixed here. I don't know if we're going to bug out. Let's see if we can skip. Oh, I guess he just concedes. So thing is, I go top. I play the Crypt. I play the Talisman of Dominance, and I pass. Opponent draws, and I play a land, and I play Teferi, I guess. I think maybe he draws and misses another land drop, and he just scoops. So either way, yeah, game's over, even though my opponent had a pretty good start. And I get to play against Dr. Lovin as my next opponent. And there is in here a game with one of the most savage starts I've had in a long time. And I can't remember if it's the one against Dr. Lovin or not. I don't think it is. All right, so Dr. Lovin's playing Atla Palani Nest Tender. So Dr. Lovin with Punani there. Palani there, excuse me, must have mispronounced it on accident. Anyway, I've got a perfectly capable hand. Double Force, Counterspell, Chrome Mox. I don't have another blue card, but I do have swords that I can imprint with Chrome Mox, or I can imprint a blue card depending on how I want to do this. Opponent has Soul Ring, and I decide Soul Ring, I'm actually going to force a negation, and I do it with a counterspell. And I do it with a counterspell because Force of Will, by the time I get Zur on board, if I can Force of Will to protect it, it's so much better to be able to play Zur, Force of Will to protect it, and then just attack and reload my hand. I'll get more counters. So I actually let the counterspell go. Top deck a Mana Drain. Because I do, I'm going to go ahead and run out a... Because I draw a Mana Drain, I actually decide that instead of going first turn Sanctuary and print the swords, I'm going to go first turn Verdant Catacombs and print the Force of Will. I said the Force of Will would be really good here, and it would have, but Mana Drain is also quite nice because it gives me the potential to just stop whatever my opponent does and fuel an early Zur, and I figure, you know what? I think I'll go that route with it. So both plays were both reasonable. There's an argument to be made for either one. Opponent just plays some mana and a dork, and I'm fine with it. So I play a tap Sanctuary. Now if I Mana Drain, I could put it into my commander. Opponent gets a Gaia's Cradle and a 2 casting cost creature that makes creature spells cost less to cast. And I top deck Helm. So I go ahead and plow the little mana fixer there, which also makes the Cradle worse. Opponent finally plays their commander, and I get to Mana Drain that. I'm going to get 4 mana for free, which is lovely. Go ahead and fetch at the end of their turn. And I do not draw a way to combo with the Helm of Obedience, but I decide I'm just going to risk the Helm because I do have Time Twister in the deck anyway. And I go ahead and cast Zur and play the Helm off of the mana. They play Porphyry Nodes, which is wonderful. It's a white drop of honey, which means that at the beginning of my opponent's upkeep, the creature with the least power is destroyed, can't be regenerated if 2 or more creatures are tied. He gets to choose one to kill. When there's no creatures on it, then it sacrifices itself. It's a great card, actually. It's like an Abyss. It's like a white Abyss for 1 mana. But it's a great card in his deck because when he wants to make eggs that he wants to kill with 0 power, so he can always kill his eggs. And if not, then he can, use it like this to kill commanders. Unfortunately for my opponent, though, I drew Wishclaw Talisman, so I can just Wishclaw, tutor, combo my opponent out. or don't even need to attack with Zur, go get the second half of the combo and win that way. So unfortunately for the opponent, they are dead. They don't get to do any of the cool stuff, but I do like it. And yeah, here's the rest of my opponent's deck here. Dr. Levin gets a the Helm treatment, and it takes a while because there's 87 cards getting exiled one at a time. Go ahead and play Wishclaw Talisman and use Wishclaw Talisman. There's the whole deck there. Use Wishclaw Talisman to get a portable hole. Play the portable hole. Exile my opponent's Porphyry nodes. Give them a Wishclaw Talisman with an empty library and say go, and then my opponent dies during their draw step. All right, so we move on to the game against Keen La. And Keen La is playing Girid Conclave Exile, and I have a mulligan, but before we can mulligan, opponent just sees the Zur and walks away from that game. So we go to Iktomi 4 instead. I think it's the last game actually that's the most, that has just the most insane start. Very good start here. You can see I've made the change. I have the repeal rather than the damage prevention. And here's the ready. And I'm actually pretty happy with the repeal against ready, since ready likes to cheat things into play. That might actually come in handy. You can see I've got early Wishclaw, possibly an early Jace. Looks all right. The repeal could also help against like, I could potentially like do something with it here. I make a mistake. Anyway, I make a big mistake here. I should have fetched not for Tundra, even though I have the Aura of Silence. I should have fetched for Underground because I got the Wishclaw Talisman, but if I'd fetched for Underground, then what I could have done is tutored for an Opal and then played Wishclaw into Opal and have get colored mana that way. But then I could do the Wishclaw repeal thing and get even more mana. So basically, I would have had like a smoother curve out here. Now it's going to be a little harder because I got a Soul Ring instead of an Opal, and because I got Tundra instead of an Underground. So I am going to play the Soul Ring. I bounce my opponent's Mind Claw, and I find an Opal off of, so I get to play the Wish Claw anyway. So I bounce my opponent's Mind Stone rather, and I get to play the Wish Claw for the Opal anyway. Opponent discards a card and draws 2 cards and concedes to this pretty gross start. So yeah. All right. And I've got this game against RTW333. Repeal was pretty nice right there. Like I said, it's not crazy good, but it was a little bit of tempo and it dug me a little deeper and found me mana I needed. And what else can you ask out of a card, right? All right. So this opponent's playing Narset, a scary commander, but I do have a Force of Will, and I hate seeing the Necro in my hand, but I hate the Mana Crypt even worse. So I Force of Will it with a Spell Pierce. Gosh, if I had only gone first. Fortunately, my opponent does not like counter back. So on his turn, instead he uses Hallowed Fountain to go get an Ash Barrens, and on my turn I play Hall of the Bandit Lord. On my opponent's turn, the mountain that they fetched with the Ash Barrens comes into play, and they cast a Sky Diamond. On my turn, I play a Verdant Catacombs into a Underground. Of course, we're going to maybe hardcast Necro at some point, while damaging myself for 3 a pop using Hall of the Bandit Lord. Bonus turn, they play Midnight Clock, and I draw a Fabricate for the turn. So I can play a Hasted Zur, so I'm going to take some damage off Hall, but I can't get Necro, of course. What I can do, though, is kill one of my opponent's artifacts. So I attack, and luckily it doesn't get stopped, so I go ahead and get, I believe, Seal of Cleansing. Yeah. We're going to seal away that Omen Clock there. My opponent casts a Mission Briefing, which is just basically a regrowth for a land, I believe they get. What are they regrowth? Hold on. I'm going to pause. Ash Barrens. Cycles it for more mana and passes. I'm trying to keep my opponent off 5 mana as best I can. So for my turn, I'm going to go ahead and tithe and attack an Aura of Silence away their Sky Diamond. And then I just go for hard cast Necro, and it sticks. Wasn't expecting that, but I will take it. I was expecting Necro to most likely get countered there, and then I could just play Jace on the next turn. But hey, I'll take it. I get to Fabricate and swing in. Sorry for the yawning. It's always like this at the end of the night. I go ahead and attack with him and use it to get an Urza Saga, play a Narset and draw some more cards, and then discard down to the hand that I want. Brainstorm at the end of my opponent's turn. He's still stuck on 5 mana over there. And I believe either concedes or dies. Let's see, can we get past this turn? All the Necro triggers are making this turn advancement quite slow and painful. I think what's going to happen is we're just going to leap ahead. It's going to go and we're going to miss some of the plays. But you can see I have a Wasteland here, which is great. My opponent didn't play their 6 mana drop, so from here I get to actually waste them back down to 4 again, which means it's quite hard for them to get up to 6. And I have Vindicate, potentially taking them down to 3. And the whole thing against Narset is doing your best to keep them off Narset however you can. Countering it, destroying mana, just do whatever you can. Keep this thing off the board because it's a real problem once it gets on the board, right? I think we're stuck. I don't think the game's going to advance, unfortunately. So, but as you can see, I wasteland my opponent. I get to Vindicate one of their lands. I don't use Narset because I can use Necro to refill my hand, so I just leave Narset on 5, so it can't be bolted out. And I believe I think I Mind Twist my opponent for 3 is what I do. I wasteland him, Mind Twist him for 3, and then Vindicate him. Draw some more cards, pass for the turn, and then at the end of their turn, I use Urza's Saga to make a robot. And then on the next turn, I make another robot. And basically, I don't think I combo them out. I think I actually beat them down with the robots. But I could be wrong. Maybe I did combo them out. Either way, I know the Mind Twist Vindicate Wasteland thing happens. And yeah, the game ends. I mean, I win. Anyway, we move on to D-Fair. And this is the start. This is the sexy, sexy start that I was... haven't had one of these in a while, and it was exciting. And I thought, what a perfect closer for the video. So we'll just start her up and take a look at this hand. So the Fair 3320 is not playing against the Fair hand at all. They're playing Atraxa. I haven't seen Atraxa in a very long time. It's the one that has a Proliferate, which works really well with Planeswalkers. And yeah, I'm gonna keep and I'm gonna play first. So let's run through how this gets played out. So get to lead off with turn 1, Urza's Saga, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Gilded Lotus, tap some mana, play a Grim Monolith, and pass. So on turn 1, we get to put 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 mana into play. Opponent says, holy smokes, or something, LOL. So I was like, yeah. You should see my final form. Anyway, so upkeep, I'm going to go ahead and let the vault damage me. Of course, I draw, and look at that. I have a wasteland even. I don't even bother wastelanding here because I feel like they'll quit if I wasteland them. I don't want them to quit just yet. I want to make some robots and do some cool stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. Plus, getting the Godless Shrine down means that I can get Urza down next turn. So, sorry, did I say Urza? Zur. The letters, you switch them around. I can get a Zur down next turn. Anyway, so I'm going to construct, draw a Spellskite for the turn, fetch a Mox Opal, play the Spellskite, and play the Zur, and wasteland my opponent's blue. I had 2 mana floating. Attack with an 8/8 construct, which is pretty good. I point out that, hey, my opponent actually has more. At that point in the game, we had the same number of lands, so everything's fair. That's how you know it's fair. Opponent actually has more lands than me. It doesn't feel like it though. All right, I get to untap. Of course, Spellskite protecting Zur is pretty nice here as well. Well, it's got a mana crypt and a land, so they do have 4 mana, but you know, somehow I think that I might be able to win this game. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and fetch with Zur. Gonna grab a Necro here. Necro for a lots. Not sure why I'm holding the Underground River. This might be a bug. Yeah, don't think I would have held the Underground River there, or maybe it's because I wastelanded. I don't know. Something's off there. But anyway, I think that could be a bug. But either way, after the Necro, of course, my opponent's down to 12, so I have literally lethal damage in play. Opponent plays Ob Nixilis, destroys target creature. I say, what do you have against my Spellskite? Of course, it gets redirected to Spellskite. Don't need to bother countering it, and opponent scoops. They're about to take lethal damage on turn. What is this? 4. Going to attack for lethal in a 40 life format. So pretty disgusting draw. A lot of fun though. It's cool to be able to do this once in a blue moon. I like it when you can do it in a format sometimes, but you don't have to do it every time. What I don't like is a format where if you don't do this, you lose because the other guy always does. That's not super fun to me. But the ability to occasionally just go completely like hog wild, that's pretty cool. So, and hey, at least I got to use my my Spellskite tech there. Although obviously, game was basically over at that point, but still pretty cool. And that's it. So that's all the games that I've played. I had the one that I lost to the natural, just whatever. And other than that, there's pretty undefeated, at least this version of them. And overall, I mean, the win rate is very high. It's an extremely fun deck to play. Feels good to play it. You get to do all kinds of, you know, swanky things. It's fun to be able to play an old friend, Time Twister. Back in the day, I remember came back from Korea, and I had the deck built, and so you know I was in the army, and coming back from Korea. And I went on leave, and I was visiting my dad, my family, and I was so excited about my deck, and I had 60 cards in the main, 14 cards on the sideboard, and 1 card missing. In my sideboard, I had Wheel of Fortune, and what I wanted to have in my sideboard was Time Twister. I had Wheel of Fortune because after having accumulated all of the other cards, I just could not afford a Time Twister, so saving up for the Time Twister. And I told my dad about it, and my dad walked over with me, and we looked. We were actually at a card shop, and my dad's not a gamer at all, but he goes, "Which one's Time Twister?" And I showed him, and I said, "This is why I can't afford it. It's like $150. Isn't that funny? Like, think about a Time Twister. Would you buy it for 150 if you saw one?" Anyway, I wanted a beta one specifically, by the way, and my dad actually threw down and this was back. I mean, this is in the 90s. $150 went a lot farther than it does now. Open up his wallet. This is the one magic card my dad bought me in my life. Bought me a Time Twister, beta Time Twister, $150, and finished my deck right on the spot. I was so freaking excited. And yeah, so the card brings back good memories. I love seeing the old art specifically because it triggers those old memories for me and everything. And just super cool. And then the sad thing is when I sold my my deck, something I never should have done, but I got out of the army like 4 years later, sold my Type 1 deck and used the money for like a couple months of rent. And of course I got $1,700 for it. A fully fleshed out, all beta, the deck, you know, the moxes, the dual lands, the works, all beta, all original art, just the way I like, as you can see online, the way that I am. Yeah, sold that thing for $1,700, the whole thing, sideboard and all, and included my Time Twister. I wish I had never sold it and kept. First of all, I wish I'd kept the deck, but secondly, obviously, right, because it's unlikely I'll ever be able to afford that. maybe in retirement or something. But right now I've got a son and family, and it's just not. Back then I was single, and I could do stuff like spend all my money on Magic cards. I just can't do that anymore. But and of course the value of the cards is so astronomical now that it's pretty far out of reach. But I also wish I had never sold that Time Twister, because I sold the beta Time Twister, and I can't. If I'd have hung on to it, I could show my dad, like, hey, Dad, I still have that card you bought me, that one card you bought me. And guess what? It's worth a lot more, but I can't do that. So that's the one thing. Like, I feel bad about selling my collection. I feel bad about not having the deck, but I feel the worst about the Time Twister. So at least I get a virtual one to play with on occasion. Although that is not why it's in the deck. I do actually believe that it has a place here, or it would not be here. As you'll recall, it wasn't in Brea. I'm not just playing it for nostalgia's sake. So anyway, I didn't mean to segue into a crazy story like that, but I mostly just wanted to show you some games. But either way, hopefully you enjoyed watching the Xur deck in action. It's a lot of fun to play. Certainly recommend it. I'm trying to work on Tapped Out to build it, like I was saying, but it's time consuming. It takes a lot of time to go through and do the card swaps one at a time. So it might be done by the end of the weekend or something. But in the meantime, feel free to pause the video, get the deck list, and either way, I want to say thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.